is a two-part of our best practices, this time focusing on the perspective of small businesses. I'm Sam Reed, chairman of the Greater Irving Five-Star Chamber of Commerce and also owner of Alpha Graphics Printing and Marketing Company. During such times in our country, it is important that we continue to create a platform for stakeholders and change makers to share their efforts and views as we have since our inaugural program in July. That first installment of the Changemakers series included a series focused on a discussion of race relations. The following programs looked at best practices for developing diversity, equity, and inclusion, LGBTQ inclusivity, federal policy initiatives, and addressing educational inequities. Last month, we discussed the state of mental health, current resources and tools available in the community to address that need, and what future changes are needed to improve the mental health care and access throughout Texas. Today's discussion will be a continuation of our program in August of 2020 on best practices for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you have a question for our panel today, we encourage you to submit it using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. At this time, it is my privilege and honor and pleasure to introduce our moderator for today. Ty Bledsoe is the Assistant Vice President of External Government Affairs at AT&T. He's responsible for the company's legislative interests among federal, state, and local elected officials. Ty serves on our board at the Chamber as the Vice Chairman of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Ty moderated part one of this best practice series, and we are honored to have him back for today's discussion. Please welcome Ty Bledsoe.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be back with you. Happy 2021. We have a new year. We are moving forward in a new decade, and Changemaker series is back here to serve you and also provide opportunities to be able to learn, listen, and to engage. Please join me all as I go through our esteemed roster of our executives, entrepreneurs, and panelists. I will start first with Christopher Cost. Christopher Cost, I'm going to talk about these unique bios. We're just going to go through these real quick before we go fast and furious into the Q&A. Chris leads a diverse team of technology and business professionals as founder and president of Carpasian LLC, an entrepreneur with a BS degree in computer science. Christopher's more than 2 decades of business and technology experience will add tremendous value not only to this conversation, but serving clients across the country. Our second esteemed panelist is Rick Kellogg. Rick is the Vice President and Financial Advisor and Branch Manager with Hilltop Securities Private Client Group in Dallas. He has over 20 years of experience serving his clients in the financial service industry. And our third panelist, who also serves as an executive committee member at the Greater Irving-Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce, is Regina Whitlock. Is the CEO of Whitlock Building Services, a family-owned, operated, full-service commercial janitorial and construction cleaning company. Regina is responsible for the strategic direction and new business development of that company. She holds P&L responsibilities for sales and operations, as well as customer experience for both business lines. Thank you, you three, right? We have all these executives, entrepreneurs, right? So I am fired up and ready to go. Are y'all ready to get into some of this?
Let's talk
right?
about it.
We're ready for this. So I'm gonna start straight up. So Regina and Rick, I have this question, right? So we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. We're gonna use that acronym of DEI. So for those of you wondering, what is DEI? It's diversity, equity, inclusion. I have this question. Does your company currently have a commitment to prioritize DEI, or do you have a comprehensive DEI plan of action for your companies?
Thank you. Yes, Hilltop Securities is admittedly just getting started in this effort. Certainly recent social issues have accelerated our work, and we want to respond as a company as quickly as we can. So one of the things that we did is 2019, we launched the Women's Momentum Initiative to reach across our enterprise and encourage women to attend events together. Last summer, we convened the Diversity Momentum Council, which is comprised of 12 individuals from across our enterprise. We have 3 separate entities under Hilltop Holdings. We have the securities division, the bank, Plains Capital Bank, as well as prime lending. And the purpose or mission of this council is to be advisory. And they've created 3 initiatives: communication, training, and community involvement.
Thank you, Rick. Regina, how about at Whitlock? We just have a little technical item real quick. I think we may have Regina muted, right?
I will add, though, that the council's primary mission right now this quarter is to craft a commitment statement. So, specifically to answer your question, does Hilltop Securities have a commitment? Yes, we are working on it.
Well, I'm glad that Hilltop has a priority, but a lot of businesses are still either trying to work through it and at the same time really trying to make sure that it aligns with their values. We're going to talk about values and priorities a little off the cuff a little bit. Chris, I have this question for you, right? Would you like to share any DI policies with us that Comprasion is practicing and such forth?
Sure. DEI is intentional at Caucasian, partly because I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. My partner is a Vietnamese immigrant. My sisters have disabilities. So it's always been in the intentional management of everything that I've ever done entrepreneurial. And also as part of the relationship I have with any of my clients when we're outsourcing, providing those management services to them, they must allow us to intentionally incorporate those into anything that we're managing and leading with their firms. So within my company, one of the things that we're proudest of is not that we're fixing the pay gap, but there's never been a pay gap. At Carpazian, we take it very seriously that no matter where you're coming from, you get paid what the job is worth, and the job is worth a fixed amount. So in my case, the best immediate recent example is I was interviewing for a single intern position early last year. And the HR firm that does all of this work narrowed it down to 2 candidates. Both candidates were so strong that I actually decided I wanted both of them. And they were both of minority ethnicities, and one of them was female. The female candidate accepted the offer, but said that she would like to have a higher wage than what I was offering. The male candidate didn't make any reference to the payment. And we already pay above average for most internships. But I gave HR what the maximums that we were willing to pay. And I told her that once she negotiated whatever the intern was willing to accept, the other intern also immediately received that offer, because we're not going to have a pay gap. That position immediately became valuable at that new price point, regardless who was filling that. And while it might have been the female candidate that was assertive enough to ask for feed and for extra pay, it can't be the determining factor on creating initial pay gaps. So just being intentional about everything you do and recognizing opportunities to balance out equity is something that we take great pride in, and we encourage any of our small businesses to take those opportunities as well.
Chris, kudos to you. Kudos to you. That's strong executive decision making, right? And changing the scale, right, of equity, right? And I was smiling, but I started to hold my breath once you started talking through I'm like, oh man, this talent was lost. But fantastic. That person reset the bar, and looks like the colleague received a raise, right? A higher compensation, right? Because of strong negotiations. Fantastic. Miss Regina, are we good?
Oh no.
Can't hear you just yet, but we're gonna get there. We're going to get there. Hey, y'all, this is live, right? When we have live environments, this is not pre-recorded. This is not pre-cooked ham, right? So I'm going to come back to you, Regina. I'm going to ask this question for all of our panelists. We talked about equity pay. We talked about your companies having DI initiatives and or comprehensive plans. Let's walk through some of the details. Can you share some of the DI training and educational resources that's made available right now to your employees? These would be webinars, roundtables, conferences, book clubs. Rick, Chris, Regina, can you share some of these details that your town is able to leverage?
Yeah, Ty, the council that I mentioned, one of the first jobs that they had was to develop an internal training program. And our firm, like so many in our industries, are actually required by regulators for the employees to go through periodic training throughout the year. Some of it is designed outside the firm. A lot of it is designed inside the firm. And with the thorough research that was done by this council, they created 2 modules. Actually, I went through these 2 modules last week. They popped up on my screen to do, so it's good timing. And the first one was titled Overcoming Unconscious Bias, and the second one is titled Embracing Diversity and Inclusion. And it's a series of videos and then exercises that takes each employee through a day in the life. In fact, the training is called How Was Your Day? So that is underway. We've got that training launched.
Listen, those are 2 strong trainings to have. Chris, I know you and your team, I know you have resources for your town.
Well, we do. We work with training programmers as well. I have relationship with multiple different programmers for specialized training, generic training. We're working with a variety of companies that are trying to develop assessment tools to go along with those trainings. And my team currently has access to any of those various items. And we also have a regularly scheduled committee on belonging inside of Carpazian, where we invite all of the employees inside the company to participate directly in that. But we also have individuals from outside of our company that we work with, that we bring in, so we can always have a refreshed perspective, because there's more to training than sitting through a class, because those classrooms are always so templated or cookie cutter, trying to give you just a basic foundation. And what I have found is if I can give my team an opportunity to explore real life circumstances and hear real life circumstances, they're better prepared to deal with the unexpected circumstances. And by having, again, outside parties, whether they be partners or customers or even a vendor, we can incorporate more from what we know, because it's going back to the whole conversation on diversity anyways, right? Where the more voices we hear, the better we understand the world that we're trying to serve, and the better we can align our products and our customer service. And that's more of the methodology that I've taken, rather than mandating some curricular access. But again, those are available as well if an employee is so far behind, or they just want to take those themselves. And then within some of the organizations I work with, I help lead a lot of those training initiatives that the members can participate in.
Yeah, I think Christopher is so right. You know, the training modules, like I mentioned, they only go so far. And there needs to be a much deeper effort to raise awareness. And the council has created a subcommittee to work through a variety of education awareness programs. For instance, we plan on having, month-long awareness campaigns for Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, Pride Month, and others, where within our organization, we will identify employees and do a profile and highlight them in our newsletter, and promote awareness of these different subjects.
Wow, so I'm thinking about some philosophies that I've grown up with, throughout my years in corporate America, small business, right? And one of my mentors, right, Cynthia Marshall, who's the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, for those of you who don't know who Dallas Mavs are, right? Cynthia says, right, diversity is diversity is a fact and inclusion is a choice, right? And that's something that we all have to really get to a point of, right? Inclusion is an active choice, right? You leaders are being inclusive in how you're thinking about compensation, equal pay, training, engagement, and then being able to implement that, right? You're not just presuming that that's just going to happen naturally. It has to be a choice that you work on, executive decision making, and bringing that forward. And so we do have a question from the web. I'm going to come to that question. It gets a little spice in that question. That's going to be particularly for you, Rick. But before we go there, I'm going to ask this question, as we still want to check and see if Regina's audio is good. Regina, how you doing?
Testing, testing. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Right.
So Regina, let us know. Tell us about the initiatives that Whitlock has at your company, right? DEI initiatives and such forth. Please enlighten us.
Sure, sure. So those initiatives are important. And as a small business, it's hard to tackle all three. We are a very diverse group of minority groups that we have working together. So we've decided to focus on inclusion. So how to get the work groups to work better together. Our workforce is predominantly Hispanic, which poses some problems with English, Spanish being their first language. So we're trying to figure out how do we bridge that gap, that communication gap. And we've put some things in place that we think will help. But we're really trying to figure out how to mix those cultures to work well together. So we're focusing on inclusion.
Well, you know what? That's a great one to focus on, right? Great one to focus on. So I'm thinking here, everybody, I'm gonna ask this question, right? Particularly for Chris and Regina. Have you measured, and if not just have, but how I should say, how are you measuring your organization's cultural intelligence of your company, right? So I'm saying cultural intelligence. Let's introduce some new terms here, right? So you have IQ, EQ, IQ being in the intelligence barometer, EQ being the emotional, right, intelligence. But we're talking about cultural intelligence of your company. Are you measuring it? And if you are, how are you measuring that cultural intelligence of your business?
Well, we've started measuring it through, employee retention. So what we were looking at when we were trying to infuse other groups into the one group, we would tend to lose people. They wouldn't feel included. So what we've decided to do, in addition to helping our Spanish-speaking employees transition over to English, we have ESL classes that we've partnered with Irving-Las Colinas that we're measuring, but also we've adopted a brand ambassador. So we've put a person in place that's bilingual that can actually bridge the gap. So we're starting to measure that. So this year we have some things in place that we're going to be really measuring employee retention and how they feel about the culture, because that's so important right now, culture, getting a culturally fit so people want to stay. So those are some of the things that we're doing to measure.
Excellent.
And what Regina was just talking about, it really is an important component of the cultural intelligence tie. When you think about cultural intelligence and you compare it to CQ, is what it's often acronymed as. And when you think about what that is, there are three facets to it: the cognitive, the physical, and this emotional and motivational. It has a tie into empathy, right? And that's why inside of Carpasian, rather than just saying, oh yeah, here's some training, learn what the rules are, learn these buzzwords, it's more about building a relationship with one another, creating an environment where we can better understand one another. We can cross those cultural divides by building bridges together. And Regina talks about that by becoming aware of those needs. She goes in with a presumption of diversity because of majority of the employees being minority status. Most of my company is minority status. I'm white, but I'm also part of the LGBTQ community. But all of my employees have been immigrant or of ethnic minority in some level for most of the time that I've been in business. So understanding all of these things are different about us all leads to that cultural intelligence, and measuring that can be difficult. But again, if you focus on inclusion, particularly as a small business where we don't have hundreds or thousands of employees that we can match a percentage of this, a percentage of that, we can measure how comfortable people are feeling at the conference tables and how comfortable are they with our customers. how much are we transferring this to our customer when we're working with them, and enforcing those same types of expectations and standards for our employees when they're going to those that are paying our company and paying our wages through those consulting agreements or other services. And again, I think the best way a small business can measure that is similar to what Regina's talking about, paying attention and seeing how those changes are having positive impact in your organization.
Mm. Now, I'm going to take a question from our audience here, and I'm going to open this up to all of our panelists. And so I want you to, as my grandmother would say when I was growing up, right, it's time to put your thinking caps on, because it's a thinking cap question. Question that comes from Miss Griffin, right? How do you begin the conversation? The conversation being about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? How do you begin the conversation if a community is overwhelmingly Anglo and due to that doesn't see the need to address diversity? It's a great question. It's a great question.
I'm willing to jump in.
I want to chime in here, but I want y'all to chime in here.
So I would say just ask the question. Ask the question with the best positive intent that you possibly can. But quite frankly, if somebody doesn't speak up and bring up these questions, they're never going to be asked, because everybody's got that fear. And at some point, you just have to overcome it or face it if you can't overcome it. And as long as your intention is positive, it may start off rocky, but if you're open-minded, open-hearted to hearing the feedback, then you're going to be able to make progress on that. And Ty, I'm sure that you can speak to shortly after Black Lives Matter, and maybe even Regina a little bit, with persons of color suddenly being bombarded by their white colleagues or even their white friends that they've known for years and years and years, suddenly saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a real thing. They overcame that fear because in the moment they finally saw and recognized what's been happening for way too long through a viral video that should never have needed to happen. But that's what it took for us to be able to empathetically understand what was happening. And we've seen the word woke come up so much recently, right? I wouldn't focus on being woke or being unwoke as much as just being sincere at wanting to know the truth. And know that no matter what you think you know, no matter how good you think you are, there's so much room for improvement, because we got so many justice issues, whether it be people of color or LGBT or gender in general. Disabilities are important. Just ask the question and see where it goes from there, and be prepared to accept harsh truth that you may not have expected to be part of the reality.
Yeah. As a white male, I, have to really contemplate that question. It's challenging if you're in a community that's predominantly Anglo, as the question was put, and you've got some resistance to some of these concepts. I still have to perhaps naively go under the impression that people are people and we have to treat each other with dignity and respect. It's like the saying of walk a mile in someone else's shoes, and have the empathy. The key word that I focus on is listen and be curious. Everyone has a story to tell, and if we just stop for a moment, listen and be curious to their history, to their perspective, then I think that's going to open up lines of communication without judgment. Not to say that it's an easy task, but in our organization, I think Christopher mentioned this before, and I did, about the training. No amount of training is going to change that culture, but ultimately that's what we want to have happen. And the only way that culture is going to change is with people like myself that are on the front lines, that are working with the employees in their office. I'm working with my clients, which are diverse. I'm recruiting and hiring people and seeking to mirror the community that I serve with the people that I hire to serve it. In my opinion, it needs to match that. So whatever the ethnic diversity is, the gender diversity is, my team ideally should mimic that. And if I do that, if I have the courage to do what I know is right, I think Spike Lee said it best, just do the right thing. And you know, if I do that and I suppress the noise of any of the resistance that was mentioned in that question, then that makes the whole organization stronger and better.
Yeah, listen, I agree with both of you, Rick and Christopher, right? Doing the right thing. I'm of that mindset, right? That companies and businesses of all size and characteristics should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But often, and we all been around these entrepreneurs and these executives, regardless of the size of their business. Sometimes that is not a part of their philosophy, right? Doing the right thing is the right thing to do is sometimes uncomfortable, right? And sometimes maybe out of one's nature, right? And when you talk about DEI, right, this is all this can be uncomfortable, right? For people who are traditionally underrepresented, we live in being uncomfortable, right? We wake up, right? It's in the air, right? It's in the air, it's in the food that we eat, right? We just have these masks, right? We walk around with masks, and so our colleagues and friends who may be in the in a different community, right? Trust us, right? It's all uncomfortable. At the same time, we're trying to find a path forward. But one thing I will say on this, and I'll just be candid here, right? When you deal with the issue of people being uncomfortable and working on solutions and just listening on topics that go back for centuries, right, in this country and go back for centuries on this, not just continent, but this hemisphere, you deal with, is it a business priority or is it a part of your value? And it's a very, very different component. We deal with values versus priorities. As we all know, priorities change, right? Priorities change quarter to quarter, year to year, fiscal cycle to fiscal cycle, but it's a part of your company's value system and individual leadership value system. That's very different. And I believe part of the counsel to the audience member to ask the question is, you want to be able to shape not only your company's culture, but you want to be able to really shape one's value system. That's very difficult when you're talking about adult professionals who've gone through life, right? When we're younger, we're more impressionable, we can learn better, we can accept people where they are, and we learn about ourselves and about the world. But you want to be able to identify, is this a core value for that leader? And I would say identify leaders across, up and down the food chain where it's core to their values, and they can speak not only truth to power, but they can, let's just be candid, you want to have empathetic leaders. If you have empathetic leaders that can empathize, as what Chris was talking about, then you can have them be willing to listen, and then you can have people be willing to learn, and then collectively there's an effort to really put things into action, right? And I think that's what the effort of justice is, right? This intersectional justice is about achieving equity and justice across the board where everyone has a seat at the table, right? And it's not about giving somebody an advantage and someone a disadvantage, but we need to bring a balance to this. Empathetic leadership is the key path, and hopefully that shapes their core values. Regina, I'm just checking with you to see any thoughts here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Were you right? I'm doing my phone audio. Oh, so thank you. Sorry, I apologize for all of the audio issues there. So as I was saying before, so we're doing some things. It is so important, again, with the cultural fit. I mean, as I was mentioning before, we have a very diverse group, and being a minority, typically you think you're diversity. You're the diverse group. So with that said, it's now we're digging in deeper and really understanding the values of our employees and making sure that we understand what their goals are at the end and helping them achieve that. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want part of the American dream, and we're here to really kind of help and bring them in. And so that's some of the things that we're doing. And we're excited about it. I mean, this is a new day, new age. I'm excited about the new administration, what it looks like, how it's representative of us, of people of all colors. So I'm excited to see what programs, what we can do to move this forward and pay equity as well. we're working on that
Yes.
too.
Now, Rick, I have another question for you. Right. Did I see a hand? Did I see a hand?
Well, I was
Chris?
gonna respond to something you said a moment real quick, Ty, and that is the back to that cultural intelligence, right? You were talking about a variety of things there with the racial aspect of things, and one of the most important things that we've got to realize when we're dealing with these, and helping Ms. Griffin with her question as well, is we cannot understand something based upon one person from a group. We have stereotypes that we've built. There's jokes out there, whether it be a blonde person joke or a joke about a person's ethnicity. I mean, Jewish individuals have been stereotyped about a variety of number of issues, and there's a number of jokes out there. If we don't understand the context behind those, we don't understand what we're perpetuating. But more importantly, if we want to overcome these types of things and we want to know something, we have to better understand soul music or R&B, rap, reggae are all music forms that have a very strong social, political, and economic basis in why they exist. And we can sing them, we can enjoy them as persons from outside of those originations. But it's back to that cultural intelligence. And it is the ability to make sense of those unfamiliar contexts and then blend in. But we got to be careful with that because cultural appropriation becomes the risk. And that's also something that become a threat that we really want to, again, always lead forward with the best positive intent that we can. But we've got to learn to know one another. So I would say again to the Ms. Griffins out there, ask your question. But to those that are being asked of the question, don't hide your culture. Don't say, oh, well, it doesn't matter to us. And Ty, I mean, one of the things that I've talked to a number of my Black colleagues about is the N-word, right? It has become a term of endearment for some members of the Black community, but for anybody outside the Black community to use that, it's offensive and it's inappropriate. That's a very massive cultural divide that's very difficult for us outside of the Black community to understand. So in order for us to better understand the other community, whether it be Black or Hispanic or Jewish or LGBT, those communities must be open to sharing the truth of those stories and getting steep and having that uncomfortable conversation themselves.
Yeah, and I say this, right, and I got to go there, right, because I have folks who will be watching this saying, okay, you know, the N-word thing come up and Ty just sit there, right, and just look all stiff. Yeah, the N-word is listen, there's a lot of people of color, not just African Americans, who are just not comfortable with that word, right? It really should be eradicated from the you know, from the lexicon of vocabulary, right? So really and we're gonna go there because, you know, we're gonna go there, you know, Chris. That word really, the intention of meaning of that word that came out of some, you know, really evil times here in the United States, right, was about oppression and you know, degrading, you know, people of African descent, right? And so the way that term has been used, yep, hip hop and just kind of culture here in the United States and other parts of the world, particularly among people of African descent, have changed it where it's not definitely the same type of meaning. It still has pain. It still has a lot of negativity with it, right? And it's still very jarring. And so that there's so many more items that we need to cover outside of that word, right? So let's just, right. So that word is one thing, but that word, you know, didn't contribute to Breonna Taylor being murdered and killed, and same with, unfortunately, with George Floyd, right? I never heard that word uttered, right? And so, you know, words are one thing and derogatory terms are one thing, but policies and economic empowerment, right, and real justice, right, those are transformative because that word, unfortunately, is going to be with us well beyond my days, right? And my great-grandchildren are going to be having to deal with that word or some kind of evolution of those terms. But these terms, these policies, and these business matters that we're dealing with, these really, if you do it right, it can impact 3 generations away, right? If someone is securing a quality paid job with benefits, right, with a 401k or a 403b, right, that can change the economic prospects. That could change the prospects of someone having hope. That change the prospects of someone having a two-parent household, right? Or a divorce. It changes so many different things. So, the N word is going to be what it is, right? But these items that you all are working to lead and the inspiration you're giving to entrepreneurs and such forth here in this form is far more powerful than the stain of that term. And so I'm gonna leave it there at this. But Chris, I do have a question. Not pardon me, Chris. I mean Rick, a question for you and your organization. Can you tell me how your company is effectively implementing or impacting social change? For example, volunteer opportunities, mentorships, and other forms of industry activism, including financial support, since you're in the financial realm.
Yeah, good question. All of the above is the answer. And starting with the volunteerism and the mentorship, that's really challenging during this time of COVID. We have been working with the mayor's office and Dallas School District to service under-resourced schools and invite students from those schools to come into our firm and shadow executives for a period of time so that they can learn about the career opportunities in financial services. We've also, but that's difficult right now, obviously, in many cases impossible. Our employees are encouraged to volunteer in those schools and nonprofit organizations that support justice across the board. One thing we have done recently is last summer we had a fundraising campaign where Hilltop was matching dollar for dollar the contributions that the employees made. The employees raised $35,000. The firm matched it dollar for dollar, and we made a gift to 3 organizations: the Education Trust, which is their mission is to support academic achievement of all students, particularly students of color; the Equal Justice Initiative; and Color of Change. So we provided $65,000 divided by those 3 organizations. The other thing that we've done is we've committed $1 million to the under-resourced schools of the greater Dallas area. That's all being managed with the mayor's office. So through that partnership and raising awareness that way.
Excellent. Excellent. Fantastic. Now, I'm trying to see if anyone wants to chime in on that, right? I think
I could chime in on that.
yes,
Some
please.
of the things that we're doing, thank you, now that I'm off the mute, some of the things that we're doing in terms of social justice and industry activism, I mean, we work, as I said, I mean, we have a very diverse workforce, and we struggle sometimes with part of our workforce that really want to work that are not legal, that have legal status to work in the United States. So we're really trying to figure out a path for them to really help them because they need to work. So how do we get them the tools that they need? So looking at being a business owner, for instance, I mean, you can apply for EIN. So helping them and directing them to a way so they can apply and get work. And we do work with subcontractors as well as employees. So we do have a home for people that really need work, and then what we're trying to do is really introduce them and give them tools that they can use to grow and take that, whether they stay with us or they start their own business. We want to be an open book and educate, and that's what we're building this workforce, this new workforce. And then also on the political standpoint, we partnered with ISSA, which is a cleaning industry association, and they're real active about how do we give livable wages to cleaners. I mean, my workforce, I own a cleaning company, so I have cleaners on the front line. How do we give them a livable wage to where they can make money and survive, because it's very, very tough. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with this minimum wage. I'm nervous with that because clients don't, on the flip side, clients don't want to pay. They don't, so we have a balancing act here, but I'm excited about it. I just believe that they should have a livable wage. They do a great job. We're cleaning for health. We have to be here. It's an essential job. and they should be paid, fairly, equitably for it.
I fully agree. It's a challenge, but livable wages are important. Everybody deserves that a chance to have a higher quality life, particularly if you're going to put the effort in the heart into it. We do have, I'm just thinking here, I just want to let everybody know, audience members, please submit your questions into the chat, right? Please submit those questions. I want to see those coming in before we wrap up. We don't have too much time left here. And so I'm going to just go fully off a script. I love doing this, right? It makes our producers always nervous when I go off a script. But I'm gonna ask this question, right? We have not talked about much the pandemic, right? We have a global pandemic here. Are at least in wave 2, right? Who knows how things are going to develop in the next, say, 6 or so months. Vaccines have been approved by the FDA, right? We have at least 3 that are approved that are being distributed currently. We have a new presidential administration here that's looking to vaccinate 100 million American citizens in the next, 99 days. And so let's talk about this. How has the challenge been in leading in managing your businesses, particularly with the DE&I focus or mindful of those DE&I comprehensive plans and priorities, along with trying to manage with the pandemic, the need potentially for PPP, right? That's the finance that's coming through the CARES Act or through a stimulus package that has been passed by Congress. How has that been? I just want to understand, like, now we get into more of the heartburn. Has this given you much heartburn, and what are some of the challenges you're facing as it's impacting your business priorities and trying to make sure you're taking care of your people?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to jump in there real quick. One of our larger customers is in the automotive wholesale, and our second largest customer is in water park, theme park business. Both of those industries hit incredibly hard during the pandemic. When we shut down and we stopped driving, no car accidents. If there's no car accidents, hard as that is to talk about, right? I mean, that's the nature of the business, the industry that my customer's in. If there's no car accidents, there's no cars to be repaired. Therefore, they're not selling any parts to their customers. For the water parks, social distancing and the safety of the customers is imperative. Some of the locations weren't able to open at all. They did not go bankrupt, but they certainly had a massive issue, and that has a direct impact on a company like mine when we're providing those CTO services to them. So January 1st this year, we started 40% revenue drop from where we were at January 1 of last year. It's not necessarily going to be an easy thing to replace one of the significant customers like that. But on the flip side, the other customer, now that we're back to driving, and in some cases we're driving differently than we were before, there's different groups of drivers than there were before that are on the road, that changed their dynamic a little bit. That now there's a different set of car accidents happening more frequently in different parts of the country than previously, where they would always, again, not necessarily something to celebrate, but I mean, they'd always be able to take advantage of icy weather because there's more car accidents than icy weather. We weren't driving significantly during the first portion of the icy weather last year. This year, we haven't had as much icy weather as in several of the places of the country. So again, having a major impact with the way the weather patterns and everything's happening, it has a significant impact. And then the mask is another big issue, right? I mean, that has become a very divisive component for America. Is there are some people that are just adamantly against that mask. And then there are some people who are just vehemently angry if you don't participate in that mask. And we've seen the videos, we've seen the news articles, and it goes back to that empathy. And we are all one nation, and we are sitting here trying to figure out how to balance this out. And you've got to try to approach it from both sides. Empathy is two-sided. There's the empathy that you need to have for taking care of the other person, but then there's the empathy that you need to have for why the other person behaving the way they are to better understand their circumstances. And that's one of the biggest things that I work with in any customers facing business, right? Is customers don't want to wear that mask when they come in, but you got to. And I think Regina was talking about the new administration. Ty, you were talking about some of those things happening with the vaccine. Biden has put down a federal mandate that on all federal property, a mask must be worn at all times. and he's going to be pushing the states. Texas government has already pushed back, saying we're going to be fighting back against any of that overreach. There's going to continue to be this type of thing. So it's going to go back to balancing this out. But even earlier in the pandemic, when we started seeing these policies and these restrictions and these regulations come into play, small businesses, medium businesses, and big businesses were all individually fighting and uniquely fighting for what they thought was their business's right. Some businesses want to enforce the mask, other businesses don't want to enforce the mask. We're going to continue to see that as one of our most stringent struggles, I think, Ty, is how do we incorporate PPE and policies protect ourselves, our employees, our customers, as one of the biggest stresses for small businesses. And I think that's where we're going to need to provide a lot of support and help. But I know that we've also talked a lot about mental health. So PPP, great stuff, right, for those businesses that are able to do that, but it's got its political tackles. I'm more focused on some of those more human level things from where I'm at and trying to provide guidance and leadership with those areas.
Rick, Regina?
Sure. That's great, Chris. I would agree. I mean, some of our challenges, of course, we're frontline employees, right? We clean for health. We're in there when there's a COVID outbreak. It's Regina, there's a COVID outbreak on line 9. Can you take care of that? So we're sending employees in harm's way. So we are preparing them. We're making sure that they're educated. We keep them supplied with PPE. We do everything that we can in terms of temperature checking to make sure that we keep them safe, and then educating them. I mean, now with the vaccine, we're deciding what are we going to do with that. I mean, educating our employees to get the vaccine and how is that going to roll out. So we have a lot of things ahead of us that we need to think about because our employees are afraid. I mean, the pandemic is real and people are dying. And we've been fortunate that we've had not as many. We've had some outbreaks on our team, but very fortunate that no one was hospitalized, but still that is a concern. And with that said, that means when I'm sending someone in harm's way, they should be paid fairly to do that job. And that's kind of my conversations with our clients, that we have to pay them more. They're literally risking their life to go in to clean up this area so you can work in and feel comfortable. And that's the other thing with our clients, you know, what's going to bring the people back into the building, right? They want to see someone cleaning high touch areas. So that means you need to have someone there cleaning that's going to make sure that the people feel comfortable coming back into the building and working. So there's a lot ahead of us in 2021. I'm you know, it's been a boost for our business. Unfortunately, on the flip side, because of COVID, we are doing more disinfecting services and things like that. But again, we would like to do it without the pandemic if we could, but that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and in our industry, as you are aware, we're dealing with money and banking. So in many cases, this is an essential business, and Hilltop Holdings, of course, has to have a business continuity plan. We have had one in place since inception, which means that employees can very easily transition to working from home in a safer environment. Now, because of that, when the pandemic first rolled out and we started seeing lockdown, shutdown, work from home orders and so forth, it was very easy for employees to work from home. I'm at home right now and am able to function just as well as I can in the office from my home office. We've been fortunate in that we've had very few illnesses, and the transition of how we do business, and particularly in my case, where, you know, historically everything I do is client facing, it's in person, and it's created a lot of challenges and a steep learning curve for my clients to get used to these kinds of conversations, Zoom conversations. But, you know, a year into it, we're all better at it. And in some cases, I favor it because I can do more meetings in a day through Zoom or WebEx than I was ever able to do driving around from one appointment to the next. But it's essential to do that to stop the spread and you know, honor people's health. And I hear what you're saying about the mask issue, Christopher, and that's very frustrating on both sides. To see how something that seems so rational can become so divisive. And I'm fortunate to be married to a physician, an internist, so naturally I get a biased perspective on COVID. And as the panelists have said, it's very real. It's no joke. And the president even mentioned it in his address yesterday. 400,000 victims of this just in the last 12 months. It's really astounding. So we all have to do our part. In our firm, no clients are allowed in the office. No vendors or wholesalers are allowed to come into the office. We will periodically disinfect the offices for those essential workers that need to be there, and masks are required and social distance. So it's important, and our business has to continue because we're dealing with people's wealth and money and banking.
Definitely, thank you. I have one additional question, and we have about maybe 4 or 5 minutes left before we close out. And so I'm just putting this to everybody here, right? Tell me this: what's your company's vision and goals in the next 6 to 12 months, particularly in regards to DEI, and how are you going to measure that, right? How are you going to measure change and improvement over that time period? Regina, let's start with you.
Sure. So some of the things that we're doing that I mentioned before with the brand ambassador, we're going to start measuring. We're checking in. We have weekly meetings with our brand ambassadors just to check the temperature of what's going on. And we're starting to track. So anything that's, of course, not measured, and that you can't see the success. So we're starting to track it. We've put some tools in place. We're doing a lot of employee engagement, if you will, just to really hone in and build that team, because our success is employee retention, honestly. I mean, that's how we're able to stay afloat and service our customers. So for us, that's what we're focused on: employee retention and the culture, building a better culture and exploring the cultures. It's been fun to learn, just hanging out with our employees and spending time with them, learning about them and their struggles. So those are the things that we're kind of focused on. That's our goal for 2021.
Awesome. Christopher.
Thanks, Ty. We're trying to help our small businesses, not just our customers, but everybody in our community, better understand how to adopt DEI as an intentional component of their business. We're a technology management firm. We help businesses manage that technology and all of their technology providers. And technology can be a great key to success. In fact, it's the work from home tools that have enabled so many businesses like Rick's, who's traditionally an all customer facing business, to still be able to function with their customers through all these advanced technology tools. It may not help Regina and her frontline workers dissolve viral issues inside of these offices they're having to go combat, but the people that don't have to do that can be better protected by using work from home tools as well. There's so many technologies available and tools that can be provided for translation services to make those technologies more available. So Carpathian is focusing on providing thought leadership and opportunities for small businesses and tech providers to better understand one another. We're throwing our first virtual conference in March to help small businesses. It's all free thought leadership. They're with some additional add-ons, but the free thought leadership is, again, about focusing on those areas where every small business can focus on better communicating with their technology providers, and technology providers can better understand how to address the needs of those businesses to scale these once enterprise-only technologies to the small business and medium businesses. And then the other thing that we've got really strong is we believe in this power of education. That's a recurring theme that we've heard about, is education changes the way things are for people. And we want to provide that. So we've got a high school education program that we're actively building up to bring in some students from underserved communities and give them some paid internship opportunities as they're graduating and before they go into college, to give them a better understanding of why they should fight for those internships, trying to figure out other ways to adapt that program to be more functional and useful. And then, I mean, Ty, you and I have talked about this a number of times on the DEI Council or the committee I believe that small businesses are oftentimes being measured and judged by the same way that a large publicly traded company is, and it's not always fair. We just don't have the people to do that. So I'm trying to build a council, I call it the DEIB councils, where small business leaders such as Regina or myself and organizations like Rick or yours can send somebody with those experiences and provide experiential advice around DEI. A company's got these issues, they need to have ideas, and we can get this diverse group of business leaders, minority business owners, minority executives, but also mainstream and majority group leadership to come and explain what it is from a business and a community perspective in order to address those issues. And those are kind of our next 6 to 12 month goals.
Awesome. Rick?
Yeah, real quickly, I would, on that point, defer back to our council. You know, they've only had 2 meetings, and these are 12 executives and professionals that are getting together for the first time to talk about our business, to talk about DEI. And as I stated, their first job is to craft a commitment statement, a mission statement for the council and for our firm. We will be measuring it. We want to measure it organically. We don't want it to be, you know, some overbearing compliance-oriented issue, because we want to build the cultural values into the organization. So more to come on that. Be happy to report back as we develop those 6 to 12 month goals. But right now we're in the process. We're sleeves rolled up doing it.
Thank you, Chris. And look at you all. This is how we talk about small businesses, how we talk about creating value, how we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and applying that on a daily basis to your operations, but also to how you're impacting the communities that you live, play, and surround yourself with on a daily basis. I want to thank the Greater Irving-Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank Board Chairman Sam Reed. I want to thank our team that helped produce this fantastic event, a provocative conversation that's about empowering and trying to move it forward for those of you. I want to thank our panelists, right? Our esteemed panelists, our entrepreneurs, Christopher Cross, pardon me, this is Chris, I'm saying your name twice, right? Christopher Cross, Rick Kellogg, and Regina Whitlock, right? We thank you for the time. We thank you for the insight, really talking about these intricacies of your businesses and for participating in a very candid conversation that is needed. I want to thank all of you, our attendees, for joining us this morning for today's program, and look out for our next Changemakers series program. And that topic is going to be talking about education in the workforce. That's going to be very, very interesting. I thank you all and make it a 5-star day.
Thank you so much.